Welcome viewers, we're the Lorcana twins, and wow, it's been a whirlwind of activity for Disney Lorcana trading card game in the past couple days. There's been a couple different card conventions and many new reveals have been made. So in this video, we're going to go over the new cards that were revealed.
Yeah, so we're going to get into that, and then after that we'll go over a little Q&A recap from when the developers were participating in an online question and answer session about different card rulings that people had questions about. So we'll get right into it with one of the cards that was just revealed today, and it is one of the most exciting cards that I've yet to see in the entire set. It is called The Beast Is Mine, and it's for Emerald, and it's an action that costs 3, and it can be inked, and it says chosen character gains Reckless, which this is a brand new keyword we have not seen before, during their next turn, which means they can't quest and must challenge if able. So just right off the bat, this has so many different uses. So for example, maybe they have a minion on their side of the board that you would like to force them to challenge with. Like let's say the 1-cost Maleficent, that's worth 2 lore. They're really only playing her to get that 2 lore, so you could force her to attack into something, and basically anything is going to take her out. So that would be, you know, a potentially good use for that card. The only problem there might be that this costs 3 and that Maleficent only costs 1, so it might not feel like the best value.
But if she's protected behind some minions, you know, this might be the only way to kind of force her to die.
So that could be strong. And then another thing, they could have a Brave Little Tailor Mickey who's worth 4 lore, and whether you really care about him challenging or not, it prevents him from questing for the turn and gaining that 4 lore, which again is like the whole reason you're playing Brave Little Tailor Mickey. So that could really prevent them from getting a win and cashing in on all that lore that he brings to the table. And then another thing, just right now thinking of with Emerald, there's a lot of cards like Cruella de Vil, for example, or the Cheshire Cat, who when they're challenged and banished, you know, it gives you a good effect if you're the controller of those cards. So you could kind of force your opponent to challenge into those cards. So that's really neat to see. Lots of cool applications. And yeah, it's a great addition.
Next we have Be Our Guest, which is another song card. This one costs 2, so a character that costs 2 or more can exert to sing this for free. And it lets you look at the top 4 cards of your deck, reveal a character card, and then put it in your hand. And then you put the rest of those cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. So essentially this card helps you look for a specific character that, you know, is going to be a good addition to your hand. It basically replaces itself, you know, with a character, something you can put on board. So very helpful into like getting deeper into your deck and finding possibly what you need in order to help you out in whatever situation you find yourself in. The other 3 cards going to the bottom of the deck, you know, hopefully you're not going to see like a bunch of good cards when you play this, so that you don't, you know, feel kind of bad about shoving some things on the bottom that you might have liked to have, you know, the next couple turns. But overall, cards like this always seem to be pretty high on the value generation, since it just gives you more selection in getting deep in your deck and finding the specific card you need.
Yeah, especially if you have plenty of leftover ink to work with. You can search for the most impactful card for that given turn.
Yeah, and I like that you can just play it as a song, so that you don't have to really touch the amount of ink you have for the turn, and then you can try to find a character that's playable with what you have left.
Yeah, it's really cool to see this song make its way into the first chapter, because it is such an iconic song from Beauty and the Beast. And next we have Mickey Mouse Musketeer. Now we already had a Mickey in each of the other 5 ink colors, so it's really cool to see the 6th color is also getting a Mickey. And this form, he costs 6, he can be inked, and he has 2 strength, 7 willpower with 2 lore. Same stat line as Maurice that we've seen, and he has, like Hercules, the bodyguard keyword. And so with 7 willpower, that's a lot to get through, you know, so this could really keep your opponent kind of stonewall behind him for a while. And then he has an all-for-one ability that says your other Musketeer characters get +1 strength. So that's kind of cool too, because it's hinting at the potential for more Musketeer characters, whether that'll be different characters or just perhaps you have, you know, 2 of this Mickey Mouse on the field at the same time. They could buff each other, and now all of a sudden they're hitting harder while your opponent's characters are challenging into them. So a really neat card to see.
Next we have Maleficent, Sorceress, and she is a 3-cost for 2/2 stat line with the effect Cast My Spell. When you play this character, you may draw a card. So this just seems like a great value generation card, because you get a body on board and you get a card added to your hand to replace the fact that you played this out of your hand. So it's just always nice to keep card advantage over your opponent, And anytime you can, generate additional cards to your hand, it gives you more options to put into ink or more options to play on your next turn.
Right, because especially what we've seen so far from people playtesting the game is that it seems like card draw is really important, and there isn't a whole lot of it so far revealed in the game. So yeah, I mean, you end up in a lot of top decking scenarios, but a card like this will just help you keep the gas going, so to speak. And that's, yeah, really nice to see, and I'm sure we'll see more examples of this in other ink colors.
Yeah, and the art on this one is fantastic.
Yeah,
and I
love it.
think in holographic, this is going to look amazing, like with the lightning going up into the sky, charging up her rod, and it's just going to be a great looking card.
The stats are a little lower to compensate for the nice effect, but yeah, if you're building your deck around a concept where you want to draw cards, which should be good in any deck, it's definitely a good idea to include at least a couple of her. And now we have Ariel. Now this is an interesting card. She costs 4 in the amber ink type. She has 3 strength and 4 willpower and 2 lore. So she has the same cost and stat line as the Sapphire Maleficent. That's a vanilla character, except Ariel has a voiceless effect, which is actually to her own detriment, which says this character can't exert to sing songs. I think thematically that's amazing, like based on the film when Ursula takes her voice. I think that is really cool, especially since there are songs in this game that you can sing. It does seem like, a little drawback for her, but it could be counterbalanced by the fact that she has that princess keyword. So, using her in a Moana deck sounds like it has some strong potential anyways. So definitely, I don't think that'll prevent me from, considering putting her in a deck. And I absolutely love the art on this one. It's just so vibrant and colorful and really captures how Ariel looks and feels in the movie.
Yeah, and even if nothing else, I think the voiceless effect is just, it's really a nice flavor, how it kind of mimics the movie where she lost her voice, so it would make sense here that she can't sing a song.
And neat to see too, she is card number 1 out of 204 in the set. So very cool, Ariel taking that number 1 spot.
All right, next up we have Friends on the Other Side. This is another song card. This one costs 3, so the character you exert, if you want to play it for free, it has to cost 3 or more. And the effect is to draw 2 cards. So here is another Amethyst card that is offering us some card draw. And yeah, this is going to be very strong, especially when you use it on certain characters like Hercules, for example. Anyone with bodyguard that's going to want to be in an exerted position would be a good target for this, so that you can draw the 2 cards for free, and then have the remainder of your ink at your disposal to kind of see if those new cards are ones you're going to want to play on the turn, or just kind of map out your turn better once you know what all of your options are. And again, this card just helps you kind of stay ahead of your opponent in card advantage. And so the longer you have more cards than your opponent, the more options you have over them, the wider you can make your board go. It's really helpful to anytime you can draw a card, and especially when you play this for free, I think that's going to be really insane value. So I would not be surprised if this card gets like 4x'd in every deck.
Yeah, and the fact that it can be inked as well. And yeah, bodyguards definitely seem like great targets for singing this type of song. And maybe even that Maleficent we just saw recently, you play her and draw a card, and she's not the best combat wise, and she only has 1 lore, so maybe the opponent leaves her alone and you can just exert her and draw 2 more. So yeah, a lot of potential here, and card draw is going to be huge. So yeah, this will definitely see a lot of play. And now Dr. Facilier himself, he is a 2-cost inkable 0/4 with Challenger +2. So on defense, he is not that exceptional or anything, and he only has 1 lore. But, as a challenger, he has +2, so he can do some decent hits to some lower cost units. And then his 4 willpower at a cost of 2 is a pretty high defensive stat. So, he could stick around on the board and annoy the opponent for a while if they don't take the time and slow down their own win condition to, take time to trade into him. So, he might see some play as well.
Next up, we have Maximus, which is a 3 for 3/3 in Amber. And the ability Horse Kick, when you play this character, chosen character gets -2 this turn. So this is like Scar's ability, Scar Mastermind, except instead of -5, you get -2. Also to point out, the yellow Mickey Mouse is a 3 for 3/3 stat line, but with no effect and an additional lore. So on this card, they're trading that extra lore for this effect. So you really do want to make sure you're getting the value out of this effect if you're going to be playing it into your deck. So it might not always be a card you want to play on 3 if you can't do a combat on that turn that makes sense with it. But when you can, I think this -2 would help your early game minions kind of favorably trade out against some of your opponent's early game, and that could help your board just get to a much better state than theirs. So when this curves out nicely, I think it has some promise. But it'll just kind of depend on the type of deck that you're building, and we'll have to see if this effect is strong. Now, they've put this effect on a few different cards so far, so it seems like one that they want people to have the option of using in a couple different colors at least.
Yes, and now we have Jafar, who is a 4-cost inkable with 2 strength and 5 willpower. Only 1 lore, which is not very much for a cost of 4, but he has Challenger +3. So while challenging, he gets 3 strength. Basically then for a cost of 4, he can, on offense anyway, be hitting for 5 damage. So that is a sizable swing, and I definitely think the 5 willpower as well is pretty high on the defense category. So again, he can withstand a lot of hits. And if he sticks around for a couple attacks of his own, he could do a lot of damage to the opposing units. So yeah, it depends how good Challenger turns out to be, but he definitely hits very hard when he's on the offensive. So again, this could definitely see some play.
Yeah, I think a previous thing we noted in one of our earlier videos was that a lot of powerful minions or with strong effects in the mid game have 5 health or 5 willpower. So with Jafar being able to swing up to 5 damage on his turn, he can take out Aurora, Dreaming Guardian, Mulan, Stitch, Rockstar. So he's just very potentially quite a combat threat.
Yeah, so for him to be able to take out those units that cost more than he does, that feels good. So it definitely feels like kind of a control the board type of card, and it puts down pressure on your opponent. It might make them feel bad about sending some of their characters on quests or other challenges if they know that he's going to be able to take them out efficiently. So definitely a card to watch out for.
Next we have Aurora, Briar Rose, and she is a 4-cost 2/5 in Sapphire, Storyborn Hero Princess. So this is another princess keyword that could be used in a princess-focused deck. And then her effect is exactly what we saw on Maximus, essentially. So you play her, and then you choose a character, and they get -2 strength for the rest of the turn. So again, this effect will be most useful when you're planning to do combat against one of your opponent's characters, and it could help you control the board early if you can make a favorable trade while protecting your own characters. And then, of course, this gives you another option that you could use to shift your Dreaming Guardian version of Aurora onto. Now, the cost of this is already almost the cost of playing that card for the full 5, so I'm not sure that you would really want to go vertical on top of this. But, the option is there if you need it.
And yeah, it'll just be interesting to see, like with her and Maximus and then Scar at the cost of 6, like which cost level will be the most efficient or most prevalent in decks to use this type of effect for.
Yeah, I think the 1 lore on this card feels kind of like not ideal towards getting closer to your win condition, but her 5 willpower is decent, so she might be able to stick around and out-trade a couple of smaller costed minions on your opponent's side of the field. So hard to say if she's going to be really that usable or not, but I do like the art for sure, and
yes.
I like that there's another Aurora that you can use for shifting if you need to, and of course the combat effect is nice too.
Now we have the Beast. Now this is an amazing looking card.
Love this card, yeah.
And I love the ability he has, Destruction, which says when you play this character, you may banish chosen item card. Now we've seen a decent number of items so far, but I'm sure there's a lot that we still have not seen revealed. And we definitely thought for a while that there must be some way to interact with your opponent's items or destroy them, because to just have to put up with them for the whole rest of the game with no counterplay seems like, not too likely to be the case. And here we have the proof here that for 5 costs, you can destroy a chosen item card that your opponent has. So, if your opponent, let's say, has played down a mirror and they haven't gotten around to drawing cards off of it yet, you can just blow it up when you play the Beast, and that feels pretty good. Then they're down a card, and you've, effectively taken their card out and placed a 4-statted strength and 4 willpower unit onto the board that can also quest and gain you 2 lore. So I think at the right time, playing this could be very effective, and especially, we haven't seen too many expensive items yet, but this character right here, I mean, if there are any really expensive high cost items to play in this set or future sets, like he will be seeing even more value, you know, being able to get rid of a high costed card on play. So very cool looking card.
Yeah, I kind of like how, like, if your opponent spent 3 on a pocket watch and then you spend 5 on this, essentially 3 of the cost is just getting rid of what they spent, so that was almost like wasted resources on their end. And then for the additional 2 costs, you're getting, you know, the 4/4 stats and 2 lore. So, you know, depending on what you get rid of with this in terms of the item cost, this could be quite a nice swing.
Yeah, and the art is fantastic. It's such a aggressive pose, and he's definitely wreaking havoc on that room.
So next up we have Jasmine, and she is in disguise. This is when she's kind of trying to hide the fact that she's a princess as she goes through the markets of Agrabah. This is a 3 for 3/3 stat line, and she has 2 lore, so this is identical to the Amber Mickey and the Steel Kristoff. So it seems like you would play this if you're trying to be a little more lore greedy, as opposed to playing like a 3-cost 3/4, which is more for winning the board combat wise. So, you know, depending on the type of deck you're building, you may or may not really give this card consideration, but she is a princess, so she could fit in a princess deck relatively well.
Absolutely. And now we have Smash, which is a steel action card that can be inked, and it says deal 3 damage to the chosen character for a cost of 3. And so this is interesting because we saw the Fire the Cannons action, which costs 1 to deal 2 damage. So they make you pay an additional 2 to deal 1 extra damage. But it does seem in this game that so far there's a lot of units early on that might have 3 willpower. And so, you know, dealing 2 just isn't quite enough. And so to balance it out, it seems like they've decided 3 is a fair cost to make you spend to remove a unit. So just like, for example, Elsa costs 3, the Snow Queen version, and she has 3 willpower. So, you know, effectively you could pay 3 to remove that 3-cost unit. Same with the Cheshire Cat. That would be a great target to use this card on. And yeah, so now Steel has a couple different actions that deal targeted damage. So that's interesting to see. This one, you know, doesn't so far have a character that recurs it to the hand like the Fire the Cannons does with Captain Hook, but you could recur it through other means, I suppose, with Lady Tremaine if you're playing it with Emerald. But this has a lot of potential, especially to take out units that are maybe hiding behind bodyguards or other things like that.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised too if we see like a 2-cost version of this card that does not have the Inkwell icon that does 3 damage. That would be a way to potentially balance it. So if you put that card in your deck, it's like, well, you can't use it as ink, but it's there for the damage only. And so, you know, that's partly why I think this card costs what it does. It's the fact that it has the, you know, the Inkwell icon on it. So I like the 3 damage on it. I think it might be a little expensive, but if you can take out a 3-cost thing or a higher, you know, with this, then you're going to find the value there. So
absolutely.
Next up we have Goons, which are the minions of Maleficent. This is just like your Amber Stitch or your Sapphire Flounder. It's the 1 for 2/2 stat line vanilla card and 1 lore. So, you know, it helps you kind of mitigate or control the board a little bit, you know, on your first maybe turn or 2. After that, the impact will fall off, but, you know, probably not a bad include. There seems to be some strong early game 1-drops, and you know, something like this can clear a Hey or can clear the Amethyst Maleficent that has 2 lore on her. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I think running a 1 for 2/2 stat line is probably going to be good for. And so if you like the Goons, I like the Goons, you can definitely put some in your Steel deck.
Yes. And lastly, for the new cards anyways, we have Prince Eric for a cost of 2. He can be inked. He has a 1 strength and 3 willpower stat line with 1 lore and another challenger. He is challenger +2. And I think the art and the image on this one I really like a lot. It's very epic, from like one of the most climactic parts of the film.
Yeah, now I just need to see who he's looking at, which might be the giant version of Ursula.
Yeah, I believe
as
he's
he drives the ship towards her.
Steering that ship toward her.
Hoping we get like a legendary Ursula card.
Oh, absolutely. But yeah, so this is, again, another challenger. It seems like a slightly slower version of Captain Hook, because just with 1 extra willpower, because they will both be hitting for that 3 damage when they're challenging, and when they're not challenging, they will only deal 1 return damage. So I'm not sure if it's going to be like deemed a little bit, you know, slower, and if people will favor playing Captain Hook, or if they'll, you know, value that extra willpower
Yeah, it seems like the main benefit in him over Hook is that, he can clear a 2-3 stat line and still survive, whereas Hook will die to anything with, 2 strength or higher. But then, of course, when something backswings into Eric, he's only going to have one strength when he's on defense. So likely that one strength isn't going to matter, but it might slow them down a little bit if they have to spend their next turn hitting into him with something else, because they won't want him to get two 3 strength swings. So
right. Well, now we're going to just look at a recap of the Q&A that happened online last week with Disney Lorcana's creative team. And so different questions got brought up. So for example, shift was a hot topic at the Q&A, and here you can see this Stitch New Dog and Stitch Rockstar. So a question people had too, especially revolved around the lantern and how that might interact with the shift mechanic. And so it turns out that you are able to exert or use the lantern to reduce the shift cost as well. So where it says you can shift 4 to play the Stitch Rockstar for 4, you can actually via lantern do that by only paying 3. So that's definitely interesting and important to know it. You can get him out a lot faster than I was predicting.
Yeah, we kind of thought that you would not be able to use lantern to affect the cost of shift. We kind of thought shift was maybe its own effect, where it's specifically saying you may pay 4, to place this stitch on top of another stitch.
But to be fair, you do pay to invest in the lantern, so it makes sense that I guess it can reduce shift, and that's interesting to know. And yeah, it can make for some very strong plays, because all of a sudden you can get the Stitch Rockstar out on turn 3.
Yes, and he would be a very strong card to have in play on turn 3.
Especially because then you still got a lot of cards left in your hand, and if you just save some 2-cost cards, then you can take a lot of advantage of Stitch's Adoring Fan's ability. Another question that was brought up is, do cards stack? So if there's, let's say, 2 lanterns in play, does that reduce the cost of the next character you play by 2? And the answer is that it does. So if you were just playing the Stitch Rockstar but you weren't shifting him, you were just going to pay the 6, but you had 2 lanterns, you could reduce that cost by 2, and now you only have to pay 4 to play the Stitch. So
another thing with shift that came up was what happens, to the shifted character and the character underneath it if they, let's say, get banished. So in the case of Dragonfire, it sends both of the cards into the banished or discard pile. In the case of Let It Go, where the cards go to your inkwell, both of the cards would go to the player's inkwell. And so that's just, or if it goes back to your hand, both of the cards go back to your hand. So once you've invested in getting your shift character out, if it's going to go back to your hand, it's nice that you'll have, the base level and the shift level to play, in the future. And, if someone puts it into your inkwell, you get that bonus ink. So it's pretty nice that it works that way. I think it'll make people think twice about, playing a Let It Go on a shifted character, just as an example.
Right. And then one other question that came up was around Belle. And so in the same way that lanterns stack, Belle's ability also stacks. So if you have 2 Belles on the field, they each reduce the next item you play, the cost of it, by 1. So you could send them both on quests, and then the next item you play will actually cost 2 less. So you could play the lantern card free of charge. So just another good thing to note there. And then one other thing that got brought up, there is going to be no limit to the number of cards you can have in your hand or in your deck. Your deck just has to be at least that 60 card minimum. And then also there's no limit to the number of cards you can put into your inkwell. And then once a card enters your inkwell, it is no longer able to be viewed by either player for the rest of the game. So that's important to note. Let's say you put a card into your inkwell face down off the top of your deck because of a card like One Jump Ahead. You do not get to look at that card to see what just ended up in your inkwell. So that's just, you can remember what you've put in there, and you do have to show it to your opponent before you place cards from your hand into your inkwell, so they can try to remember as well. But once it is down there, you cannot take a look at it again. Now, there were some other Q&A things that brought up, but those were some of the main points.
Yeah, one last one we could talk about is just that the cost of a card is what is printed in the upper left. So on Bell it is 3. There's some cards like Lantern that, you know, reduce the amount you have to pay to play it, but it doesn't technically reduce the cost of the card. So that Stitch Rockstar effect where it says, you know, you may exert a card that costs 2 or less when you play it in order to draw a card. So if you used Lantern on Bell, you know, you're paying 2, but her cost is still 3. You know, you're allowed to play 2 because of Lantern, but because her printed cost is 3, she doesn't trigger the Stitch ability, so you can't draw a card and exert her like that. So just something to point out there, and this is also true of like the card Just in Time. So when you look at the cost, if you have like a 6 cost Scar, you can't use, like, let's say Lantern and then try to play Just in Time on him. It doesn't work like that because Scar is a printed cost of 6, and Just in Time specifically lets you play a cost of 5 or less. So again, Lantern is affecting the amount you need to pay, but not truly changing the base cost.
Well, yeah, now we've seen a lot of new cards, so I was just wondering what would be a chase card that you would love to see in the game and try to collect if it makes an appearance. So for me, I would love to see a Peter Pan card. And I think that there is a high probability we will, because we've already seen Tinkerbell and a couple different versions of Hook.
Yes.
And preferably, I mean, I'm fingers crossed that it's like a super rare or a legendary Peter Pan. Maybe he's flying above the jungle and you can see the waters of the bay nice and blue down below him. And I don't know, maybe he'd have a really nice effect. And he could be in Emerald, perhaps. He's a very tricky character, pretty evasive, but I don't know if they'd go the evasive keyword route on him. But yeah, I could see him in the Emerald cost, which would also match his outfit quite well. And but I would love to see a card like that in foil, and would definitely want to collect a Peter Pan card like that. But how about you?
And I currently am hoping to see Tarzan. And I think it's a keyword we haven't seen yet, but I think it'd be nice if there was an ability like possibly First Strike or Swift Strike, where, you know, if you're challenging, that you get the first hit in combat, and if that banishes the opposing character, then they don't get to hit back.
Yeah, that'd be very strong.
So that would be kind of a cool way to give him like priority on his turn, because he seems like really fast. He's swift when he's moving through the jungle, and he's strong. So, you know, I could see an ability like that making sense with him. Or, you know, if they don't have the thing like that in the game, possibly an evasive too, or like a challenger. It's something that is kind of a nice combat effect. So
yeah, and I think like a realistic one that I would guess we'll probably see would be either a super rare or legendary Elsa. I think I'd be very surprised if there isn't one of those in the first chapter. Could be wrong, but
yeah, I'm sure she'll be popular.
Yeah, and there's still at least one Elsa that we've had the name revealed, but we haven't seen the card. So, you know, there's always a chance it could be that one.
I think there's Queen Regent, and then like
Spirit of Winter.
Spirit of Winter, yeah. And then, like I said before, a big Ursula, you know, possibly from the last battle sequence in The Little Mermaid. I think that would make for a really cool legendary card. Maybe she's in the middle of the Maelstrom, and, you know, she's raising the big trident.
Maybe a Zeus or a King Triton, something like that as well. Yeah, but how about you guys? Like, what are some cards that you would love to see in the set that you would want to chase after? Any guesses that you have about what the last legendaries that have yet to be revealed might be? Let us know. But other than that, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.
Yes, we will. Bye.